The Notre Dame Fighting Irish are heading to the national championship. If you're a Notre Dame fan, that has been something that has been elusive for some time now since the BCS era. That's something now that you've waited for a long time to hear, and that's something that in this game you earned in every single sense of the word. Final score in the Orange Bowl, 27-24 over Penn State. We're going to talk about what happened in this game, talk about our thoughts on this game, and our thoughts coming out of this game here is, again, Notre Dame is heading to Atlanta to play for all the marbles. First things first, though. If you are new to the channel, or you're a Notre Dame fan, you're a college football sicko, if you love this sport with every fiber of your being, this is your spot. Make sure you're subscribed. We're talking college football through the national championship, after the national championship, and beyond. So we appreciate you in advance for subscribing and dialing in. Notre Dame just found a way. And we'll kind of dig deeper into the whole find a way part of this for Notre Dame, but nothing about this really made that much sense when you look at the box score. Notre Dame was outrushed essentially 100 yards to 200 yards. Notre Dame lost the turnover battle. 2 interceptions from Riley Leonard, what ended up being the game-winning interception of Christian Gray on Drew Aller, but that was the only one. They only got to Drew Aller one time, as opposed to Penn State and that elite defensive line getting to Riley Leonard 5 times. That was the box score. Screaming in the crucial areas that Notre Dame won over Georgia to get to this spot, definitively lost those spots. Also, let's call a spade here now. They were injured across the board. And I mean, it got worse in this game. You got offensive linemen going down. Jeremiah Love is out there with the knee brace. Bo Collins, I don't believe, even played any meaningful snaps to my knowledge. And on top of that, we went into this game picking Notre Dame, but saying the whole time, hey, man, this is Penn State operation. Probably the more talented team. I believe from a stars perspective, Penn State had the slight edge. We did a top 10 player breakdown on this show going into this game, the top 10 players in this game. I had 7 of them on the Penn State side alone. And so all that's to say, there's so much about this game that just didn't make sense and shouldn't have equated to a Notre Dame win. But it did. And before we get more into the game breakdown, I think you got to give Steve Angeli a ton of credit for what he did, holding his water on that drive to end the first half. My guy gets in there, goes 6 for 7, ends up getting them on the board, getting 3 points before half that ultimately allowed them to tie the game with that first drive out of the second half with Riley Leonard. The dude, I think, just showed up in such a big spot as a backup quarterback, man. You never know when your number's going to be called. For him to be so timely and so clutch, he deserves his flowers and then some. So I want to make sure we give it to him. On top of all that, going back to why this game didn't make sense, we said during our game prediction, hey, we like Notre Dame to win. However, the one thing they can't do is go down by double digits. Because Notre Dame, the way they're built, not really one of those teams that's great. You would think in a game where they have to climb back into it just based on how they operate offensively. They want to be a little bit more complimentary, a little bit more formulaic. And so what happens? Pretty quick, Notre Dame goes down 10 points in the first half. And you're like, oh boy. With the way that Penn State's running the football, I don't know how this is going to happen. So I kind of set the table there to just try and accentuate how impressive this showing was in the second half from Notre Dame and the entire game, the way they fought. Pat Coogan in that halftime speech must have been cinematic. Social media, do your thing and leak that. The halftime speech from Marcus Freeman, per Riley Leonard, sounded pretty epic as well, talking about we are the conquerors, we're holding the pen, how are we going to finish our story. I loved that. Jaden Greathouse, man. In the vein of this team just finding a freaking way, Jaden Greathouse over 100 yards, made the play in my mind offensively for Notre Dame that you look back and think about in terms of what allowed them to win this football game. I know it wasn't the game winner, but for him to go over 100 yards and have that big touchdown catch in the second half, I mean, his previous high this season was 66 yards. My guy had, I believe, 7 for 100. Yeah, I mean, talk about a freaking day and a half for my guy at the office. To show up in that fashion when your team needs you the most, absolutely huge. Notre Dame in the second half, I loved so much the way that they started to, I mean, we say swing your sword a lot on this show, so I don't want to be too cliche, but it felt like that was kind of their vibe in the second half. Started to get a lot more north and south within that run game. Sort of get the vibe that, okay, Abdul Carter's really fast. This defense is flying all over the place. Oh, we got to find a way to just puncture and take what we can get. We're really physical, pulling linemen downhill. I love that operation. That in itself opened up plays in the pass game. Did not have the Aeneas Williams deep shot on my bingo card, but Riley Leonard in the first series of that second half made it happen. Give Mike Denbrock a lot of credit because as scrappy and as resilient as this Notre Dame team is, there's a lot of dudes on that Penn State team that are going to play on Sundays. And for Mike Denbrock to have the game plan he did, to just lights out scheme everything for Notre Dame, to be able to put them in position to score the points they did, and to be able to ultimately win this football game, I think he deserves a lot of credit as well. Even with the game that Riley Leonard probably wishes he had a little more juice downfield with the 2 interceptions, he was timely. He was timely, and we said that, man. Like, we knew at some point in time, Notre Dame fans knew as well, at some point in time, Riley Leonard was going to make some plays for you to allow you to win this football game. It might not be pretty. It may not make a lot of sense. It might not be something you see a ton of throughout the game with the 2 picks, but at some point in time, man, leader of your football team is going to, again, find a way to get it done. The comp I use is like my baby girl, man. She's 2 months old, and we swaddled her up nice and tight at bedtime, but I know she's going to find a way to get out of that thing come 7 a.m. the next morning. Kind of felt like the same thing with Riley Leonard. Just kept battling on defense, too, because in the first half, Penn State was just abusing the perimeter run game, and Notre Dame, it felt like, didn't really have an answer for it. They were doing their best to set the edge up front and didn't do a bad job of it, but when Nick Singleton or Katron Allen would put their foot in the ground to get north and south, the second level wasn't getting there in time. That changed in the second half. They were triggering with authority from that second and third level that I think ultimately allowed them to kind of climb back into this spot and play the aggressive style of ball they did on the back end. And then Christian Gray, guy has an interception in the first half, gets wiped out from a pass interference. There's another interception from the Notre Dame defense towards the end of that game that gets wiped out with the PI. And then Christian Gray just keeps battling, keeps being physical. Team just continues to find a way to get it done and ends up making the play that ultimately allowed them to kick the game-winning field goal. So coming out of this thing, man, you talk about what this Notre Dame team is right now, and I think they are a direct reflection of who Marcus Freeman is. Because we've had Notre Dame teams in the past be gritty and be tough and have high draft picks on the line of scrimmage. This Notre Dame team has that same grit and toughness, but there's a real confidence and swagger and us against the world mentality. Some of that probably gets fanned into flame from the NIU loss. I think a lot of it is just who Marcus Freeman is and who he believes this team is. Because post-game, he's cool, calm, collected. He's confident. He's talking about his team and trying to deflect all the praise onto them. But you watch this broadcast, what stuck out to me was even during the game, when they're down, when they're not having success, and he's like, we're going to be aggressive. These guys are dogs. They're savages. We're going to just keep on going. There was no quiver in the voice. There was no uncertainty. There was no, we're on the ropes. It was just a dude who was confident in his team, knew what they were about, knew what their DNA was, and ultimately that shone through. But, I mean, if I'm a recruit, I would think very, very seriously about going and playing for Notre Dame after seeing what they were tonight and seeing who that head coach is, man. Because I think Notre Dame looks even more brilliant right now for getting Marcus Freeman the new deal that they did before this college football playoff started. He is a star in this sport. Not a rising star, not ascending. He is a star in this sport. Full stop. So let me say this. I've said this in previous Notre Dame videos, but I want to make sure we say this one more time. Notre Dame of old is gone. And that's not to say they don't have still great tradition and that logo doesn't still mean something. They don't honor, the teams of the past. I'm not saying that, but I am saying those old Notre Dame outfits that would show up to a college football playoff game or a BCS national title game and just get boat raced because they were out-personneled or they weren't tough enough or they weren't resilient enough, whatever it was. I'm not saying I know the answer, but whatever it was that those teams didn't have, this team has it. And it starts with Marcus Freeman. And they're going to have it here for a long time in the future, as long as he's the head coach. So Notre Dame now, they're breathing different oxygen when it comes to where they live in the college football world. They no longer have to rationalize, but our tradition, but this logo, but hey, look at this nice helmet. No, they're just a really good football team. Forget all the extracurriculars that makes Notre Dame what they are. And I'm not saying you don't still honor those. Those are important, but you don't have to stand on those as to why Notre Dame is a place that you should go to if I'm a top prospect in America, wherever I live, Southeastern or the West Coast or wherever. You can stand on what you're doing on the football field. And what they're doing on the football field right now is a game away from hoisting the national championship. That's what they're doing right now. So we'll see who they end up playing in that deal, but I want to make sure we say that. Notre Dame, they don't have to rationalize anything. They don't have to make an excuse for whatever they are, whoever they are. Like, this is a real deal, legit Tier 1 operation. They deserve and they have earned their spot right now, this national championship. And it's so hard to not be happy for a guy like Marcus Freeman, man. That dude is a star in this sport. I want to make sure we say that one more time. Quick touch here on Penn State, man, just to give them their flowers. I thought Colton Ecke did a really good job. And the final score doesn't really indicate that, but, I mean, they're just so limited offensively at receiver. And what I have written down here is, man, like, I'm okay with you being below average in certain spots, but you can't be absent at certain spots. And Penn State had 0, count them, 0 receptions from a wide receiver tonight. Still scored 24 points. Now, the Drew Aller interception is ugly, and the interception that he got called back in the second half is ugly, so that just is going to sit with you kind of funny. I think Drew Aller's still a really good quarterback. That you can't make that mistake, and it's easy for everyone to sit here and say that today and be the, I guess, what are we now, Friday morning quarterback. Like, that's easy. He's still got a bright future. I think if he has some more help around him, that changes what Penn State is significantly. The whole Penn State offense was 3 skill players, Allen, Singleton, Warren, and then Drew Aller, do whatever you can do. They were willing a pass game, willing explosive into existence. They had done that all year long, but it's hard to do against a really good Notre Dame defense that's as opportunistic as they are. So, again, Tyler Warren, he's a freak show. I want to make sure we mention him, too. He is going to be an absolute stud in the NFL. Tonight, 6 catches for 75 yards. Penn State's got some work to do at wide receiver. But besides that, man, I know the narrative around James Franklin's going to run. I know there's going to be a lot said about him in big games and all that, and that's fair. But, like, I don't have a ton of negative things to say about the game plan. I have negative things to say about the roster, but that defense is elite. I think Drew Aller is in the neighborhood of where you could see him eventually elevate to being elite. I think Andy Colton-Ecke's elite, but the receivers just make it a thing where you can't even start the car. So with that being said, Penn State, this one hurts. Great season in a lot of ways, making the semifinals. This one hurts because of what it was. And, I mean, it's tough. They ran into Notre Dame, man, because of what they're playing like right now. And they're just, their vibe that they're down to play in the parking lot, down to play tomorrow morning. They'll play anywhere, everywhere. And that ultimately, to me, was the difference in this spot. So, came down to the margins. Notre Dame won those margins in timely fashion. And they are very much so on their way to Atlanta to compete for a national championship. So, make sure you're locked in here. We'll talk a lot about it here the rest of the way. We will be in Atlanta for this game. Coverage all week long, all weekend long. Really, I mean, all post-game long as well from Atlanta. So make sure you're out in here. Make sure you're subscribed. Gosh, this is awesome. National championship right around the corner. We'll find out who Notre Dame plays tomorrow. We'll have a reaction for you as well. We're going to keep this party rolling now, and we will see y'all next time.